right, welcome back, Skol Hoppers. Kind of a nail biter there at the end, but man, we get a chance to recap another Vikings victory. Super excited. They're 5-0, headed into the bye week. They get to travel back to the U.S., take a little bit of a break, get people healthy, specifically Aaron Jones, hopefully.
Yeah.
And a really, really exciting start to this young Vikings season, and an early bye week, which I think is helpful at this point. But yeah, I got a couple questions for you regarding this Vikings-Jets game over in London. You ready?
Yeah, ready.
All right. So one of the things I noticed, and my viewing of the game was kind of like hit or miss because it was 8:30 in the morning here, Central Time. I was at church for a while. I had another obligation to go to after church. And I didn't get home until the end of the game. But it seemed like to me at the end of the game, the final drive, the crowd was kind of out of it. It just seemed like everybody at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was just kind of standing there like, what's going to happen? Whereas if it would have been, if this would have been a true home game for the Vikings, the Jets get the ball with, 3-something left on the clock. That stadium would have been like the craziest it's ever been, especially with Aaron Rodgers under center for the Jets. Do you think that affected the game at all, the crowd noise being an international game?
I think it could have. I think back to the 2020 year where they didn't have crowds in the stadium at all, and I think it definitely affected it. I just think, obviously, I would say most of the people there are probably native to London, or at least in that area. There's probably a decent percentage of people who traveled over there, but it couldn't have been enough to fill the whole stadium. From what I was seeing on Twitter, they weren't doing a really good job of explaining what was going on, like through the PA system to the fans in the stadium. So if you didn't already know football, then you might be really confused, especially when there seemed to be some issues with like getting the play clock correct with the game clock, and the refs had to stop the game 3 or 4 different times, and it was just like, what's going on? And we were watching on TV, so like we could hear the explanation, but if you're just in the stands, you wouldn't have any idea what's going on. And that's even if you knew the game of football. So yeah, it probably didn't help the energy in the stadium. I did notice towards the end when the Jets were making some crazy good plays, the crowd did kind of come up a little bit, but it never sounded like a loud roar, really. I think that would have been interesting to be in as a player if you make a good play and not really much crowd fanfare.
Yeah, definitely a factor for sure, I think. Mm-hmm. I think another factor was the weather. It was an open-air stadium, and it seemed like it was a lot cooler, and there was some precipitation coming down. I don't think it was like a downpour. It just seemed kind of like this drizzly rain, but one of the observations I had was both quarterbacks struggled to complete passes down the stretch there. Is weather a factor too in this game?
Oh, yeah. You got to think it is. Just because there was one, the announcers were saying, it's starting to get a little hazy, a little rainy here. And then, literally the next play, Aaron Rodgers threw an incomplete pass to, I think it was Garrett Wilson, who just slipped. And if not for slipping, he would have gained 15 yards or more. So weather's always a factor, especially when things get wet, especially if it didn't start that way in the game. So you got to kind of transition, maybe swap some cleats out for longer cleats or something. I don't know for sure. I wasn't there, but you got to imagine that became a factor. And both quarterbacks could have played better, could have completed better balls. I know even towards the end of the game, you could see the fire behind Justin Jefferson's eyes. And there were a couple of balls thrown his way that maybe a little behind him, maybe a little too high, too low, not perfect balls, but also catchable things for him. They'd be highlight reel catches, but they could have been caught by him, and I think weather might have been a factor there too.
I think another factor on the receiving end is the lack of a running game, kind of second half of the second quarter, and then the rest of the game. Aaron Jones leaves the game early with a hip injury. And then, just an obvious lack of connection between quarterbacks and wide receivers definitely had a huge impact. I didn't really see the injury. That the injury kind of seemed like it went under the radar, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, he's in the tent, and then he's out of the tent, and he's trying to do some warm-ups on the sideline, and then they shut him down. Mm-hmm. I mean, how big of an impact do you think losing your running back one played
Yeah,
on
I
this
mean,
game as well?
I think you're right. From what Coach O'Connell was saying after the game, it sounded like it was something he's kind of been dealing with a little bit, and he was kind of pushing through earlier in the game. So I don't know if there was a specific hit or, direct injury that made him come out of the game. I think he was just feeling it too much, and then they ultimately made the decision to take him out for the rest of the game, which KOC was saying hopefully we avoided something major by making that decision. It definitely, I mean, if that wasn't the reason, then I don't know what the reason was. The offense took a nosedive after Aaron Jones was out. They didn't have much of a run game to speak for, and the Jets are notoriously a good pass defensive unit. So it's tough when you lose a whole dimension of your offense, pretty much, because Ty Chandler wasn't doing much after Aaron Jones went out. And then you go up against a nice, stout defense in the pass game. I think that would make anybody look a little uneasy or not their greatest. Hopefully Aaron Jones is okay, though. That would not be good if he was out for a while. But the bye week's coming at a good time for him.
Yeah, and kind of in light of all of that, with Aaron Jones out, I felt like at times Sam Darnold still kind of had this hero ball mentality, trying to force things to happen when it wasn't there. One of the strongest examples of that was even before Aaron Jones went out. It was the sack that he took on the first drive of the game. It was kind of this naked bootleg out to his right, and he was expecting Aaron Jones to be open kind of down in the flat, and he wasn't. And he gets chased down by a Jets defender. I don't even know what position or who it was. But he could have easily just chucked it out of bounds, saved himself the sack, saved Will Reichard probably 15 yards on the field goal attempt. And instead, he forces Reichard into a 54-yard attempt, which he makes. But, man, you got to wonder at some point, does Sam Darnold kind of get out of this, like, I got to make things happen type of mentality? Like, we've seen him be really, really good. Even today, we saw him be really, really good at managing the ball, even changing the play at the line. But there's this little shred of him that's still, it's like he's still playing for the Jets, and he's still playing from behind, and he's still trying to, prove himself in the league. I don't know. Do you think he fixes that? Do you think he's able to get out from under that as the season continues to develop?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it, 1, 2, 3 times every game so far. He'll do something. It's like, what are you doing? Luckily, it's only 1, 2, or 3 times a game, and not every single play out there. Because for the most part, he still looks good. Today was rough, but at some point, you got to credit the Jets defense for being good. Just like last week, you had to credit the Packers team for being good in the second half. I think that'll come with more coaching, more time with KOC, more comfort in their communication and how they're running the offense. Last year we saw it with Josh Dobbs, where KOC was, translating the play into Dobbs' ear as he's walking up to the center. I wonder if there was any semblance of that kind of an idea, like more training wheels earlier on in the season, and maybe they're starting to spread their wings a little bit, and you're kind of getting out of your comfort zone. I don't know. That's a total guess by me. But I'm confident that what we've seen from Darnold is what we'll continue to see, and we'll see less and less of these boneheaded, seeing ghost type plays. Because if you notice, too, early in the game, Darnold had a couple of decent runs that made differences in drives, and then you saw that happen less and less. He would try to force a ball downfield rather than take an easy 2, 3, 4 yards in rushing and then live to see a third down or something like that. So I think it's just something they'll continue to grow and keep getting better, KOC and Sam Darnold together this year.
Yeah, for sure. We've been trying to keep these little recap videos under 10 minutes, and we're already like 30 seconds away from that. So I've got like 3 more things that we're going to hit, because just, what the heck, why not?
Let's go.
This will just give us more to talk about on our episode that we'll record, episode 61, coming out later this week. But let's roll with a few more here. Speaking of kickers, Will Reichard, Will the Thrill, he's perfect on the season. Are you kind of fingers crossed hoping that he at least misses something sooner rather than later, so we don't have a Gary Anderson, Atlanta Falcons 98 NFC Championship game meltdown kind of thing?
Yeah. No, I think when people say like, okay, they got one loss out of the way, now they're not under threat of being perfect anymore. Okay, at least he missed one, so now he doesn't have to worry about being perfect. I think that's just something people and we as Vikings fans tell ourselves to make us feel better after a loss or a missed kick. No, I think just keep making them. I mean, I'm not concerned. I tweeted earlier from the Skol Hop account that it seems weird that I'm more concerned about a punt to or from the Vikings than I am about a 50-plus yard field goal attempt for the Vikings. Like, he seems to have gotten his act together as a pro. He's still perfect all the way through, unless you count that one preseason block kick. But in the regular season, Will Reichard is perfect, and they haven't all been 27-yarders. They've been long. Some have been short, but there's been a few 50-yard-plus field goals, including 2 today. And yeah, no, keep it going. Stay perfect, and don't cut your hair, Will Reichard, until March.
Yeah, the Purple Persuasion Twitter account, they put out like stock rising, stock falling after every Vikings game. And they had Will Reichard as stock rising, and they had the punt unit as stock falling. And I think that's a pretty accurate assessment right now of the Vikings special teams. I think Will Reichard is playing really, really well. I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is looking really good for making that selection in the draft when he did. It's not that the punt unit has been bad, and it's not really that Ryan Wright has been particularly bad, but it's the coverage game. I don't know if you saw it, but on one of the Jets punt returns, whoever was returning the punt for the Jets, he stuck his leg out and tripped up, I don't even know who it was, tripped up a Viking to make it look like the Viking ran into him. And he got running into the returner penalty, 15 yards. So there definitely has to be a little bit more awareness of that punt unit. They've got to clean some things up, and they've had some faux pas on the return end of the game too, punting. So yeah, I definitely agree with that Purple Persuasion assessment that the punt unit as a whole, both punting and punt returning, needs some improvement. All right,
and last huge bonehead play by Ivan Pace to run into the kicker, or rough the kicker on the punt, which led the door to ultimately the Jets kicking a field goal and getting to within a touchdown. That you can't have that. And if you notice after that, the Vikings didn't rush the punter near as much as they had been before. They were just content to block and get the punt return.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Good point. All right, last little bit here, and I'm going to bundle these things together just to kind of keep things short. In the first quarter this season, the Vikings have outscored their opponents 48-3.
Yeah.
That's impressive. And then in all 5 of their games, the Vikings have held an average of a 21-point lead at some point in all 5 games. Does that bode well for this team moving forward, both in all aspects of the game, offense, defense, special teams? What do you make of those stats?
Yeah, I mean, it just start hot, because we've seen the last 2 games, they started hot, and it really saved their butt by the end of the game. So, I mean, you just put your foot on that gas pedal, drive as fast as possible, and don't let up. I think the issue is they've been letting up or trying to get in their own heads and how to play with a lead and how to play the game. No, they've proven to themselves they're not good enough to finesse things and get cute and try to bleed as much clock as possible and still, run with more of a lead. They just got to keep going and never stop, and don't let the other team breathe. So yes, start hot, stay hot, and it will. If the Vikings lose a game this season, which they will, they're not going to go undefeated. But if they do, it'll be something like, oh crap, they got down to a quick 10-0 or 14-0 loss or deficit, and they just couldn't crawl their way back.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a taste of their own medicine at that point, because that's what they've done to opponents in these first 5 games. So it's crazy to think that we're sitting here 5-0. 5 weeks in, the Vikings still haven't trailed a game. It's either been tied or the Vikings have won since early in the first quarter of the first game against the Giants. The Giants were up 0. So a heck of a start for this Vikings team. It's been very unexpected, very exciting to watch. Today's game, it felt like the most like nail biter. This could like. I was telling myself when I got home and was finally able to tune into the live game. I was telling myself and telling the TV, telling Kevin O'Connell through the TV, don't give Aaron Rodgers the ball at the end of the game. We can't trust him. And sure enough, they did. And fortunately for the Vikings, Stephon Gilmore was there to basket that final interception with 40-something seconds left on the clock, and the Vikings were able to get their offense back on the field in victory formation and take the dub in London. But yeah, this was maybe the most nerve-wracking win that the Vikings have netted so far. But other than the Lions on the schedule, I mean, is there really another team out there that you're concerned about?
Injuries. I mean, I'm more concerned about internally what happens with the Vikings than any opponent they're going to face, because they've proven even on days like last week and today where we're like, I don't know, like they're still winning, they're still making good plays. I think it's good to see that fire in Justin Jefferson's eyes, and his post-game interview, he, was a little passive aggressive, maybe just frustrated with himself, like, hey, credit to the defense for winning us this game. Like, that's good to see the best player in the NFL be pissed off and ready to play. I don't think he's mad at anybody. I think he's just mad at how close they've been getting. So he's motivated, and I'm here for it. I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it'll be good for this team to have a week off, especially after traveling internationally. Get home, get reacclimated, get readjusted, and kind of fix some of these things that have been going wrong really since the end of the second quarter at Green Bay. They with the Lions in a couple of weeks. So.
Yep. Hey, also, no purple punishments on episode 61. We both correctly predicted a Vikings win. So maybe we should do something where we get something nice. I don't know. My kids get ice cream after a Vikings win. Maybe. I guess we do treat ourselves to beer every episode. So I don't know.
Yeah, how about some beer? We'll treat ourselves to some good beer.
There we go.
We'll record this week's episode tomorrow night. Coming out later this week.